Hello everyone. In this video, I'd like to talk about Softbank's recent decision to sell its ARM business unit and why NVIDIA proposed to buy it. So let's go over the details. So about a few weeks ago, Softbank announced that due to its business difficulty over WeWork and other investment that didn't turn out great, it's trying to sell up to $41 billion in assets to prop up its struggling portfolio. And for part of that, it's seeking full or partial sales or even public offerings of ARM holdings. Of course, there have been a lot of rumors of potential acquirers such as Apple, Samsung, but there has been an article that actually NVIDIA is the one who is in advanced talks to buy ARM from SoftBank. So regarding this news that NVIDIA proposed to buy ARM, there were a lot of skeptics. First, starting with, is ARM business unit really worth it for NVIDIA? And even if it is worth it, can NVIDIA afford such expensive deal? And also, other than affordability wise, there is also an antitrust issue. Would ARM's customers approve such deal? And also, would they flee to different open source platforms such as RISC-V because they are in direct competition with NVIDIA? And also there are other issues such as antitrust regulation, which NVIDIA has to pass in different countries. And this might be actually challenging in specific countries such as China. So let's go over more details into this. So let's start with the question of whether our business unit is really worth it. We can first start with its valuation from its business profitability. And based on ARM's financial statements within the SoftBank group, the quarterly revenue of ARM was about $400 million, and its annual revenue is about $2 billion last year. Now, there's no exact figure I could find about its exact profit margin, but rumor is that the profit margin went all the way down to 10% recently. So we can assume that ARM's annual profit is around $200 million. Now, SoftBank acquired ARM business unit at $32 billion in 2016. So now that it is 2020, SoftBank might want to sell it at much higher price than $32 billion. So if we just think about ARM business profitability wise, the price to earnings ratio, which is the company valuation divided by its annual earnings, is definitely going to be higher than 160, which is pretty much high value. So if we think only about current profitability of the ARM company, it just doesn't make sense to pay that much of a higher price. Now, let's simply assume that NVIDIA still thinks ARM is worth it and still wants to buy. But the question is, can NVIDIA afford it? And based on NVIDIA's financial statements, its annual revenue is around $11 billion. Annual profit is about $2.8 billion last year. And its current cash and cash equivalents on the asset side is about $10 billion. So skeptics might think, does NVIDIA really have enough cash for that? Maybe it can do the deal by the stock because NVIDIA's stock valuation is quite high, around $280 billion recently. But there's also skeptics of whether, hasn't NVIDIA's revenue recently just propped up because of boom over cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, and just isn't it gonna die down and get reduced anyway? So if we want to understand the true motivation of why NVIDIA wants to purchase ARM business unit, we need to look at NVIDIA's different business segments. Now, whenever people typically think about NVIDIA, they think about graphic cards for the gaming users. But we need to look at the different business segments stated other than the gaming, which are professional visualization for artificial intelligence vision, data center, and auto industry. Now, there's a reason why NVIDIA stated auto industry separately, even though its revenue only takes about 5% of total, because NVIDIA sees its future in these segments. And that's why it wants to buy ARM business unit, because ARM has the strong chip design capability, not only in CPU, but also in communications, image signal processing, ISP, IoT, Internet of Things, and many, many other chips that are essential to these applications. So if NVIDIA purchases ARM, it could utilize ARM's capability to design not only CPU chips, but also a lot of different chips that essentially acts as a sensor and actuators within the auto industries, such as this image signal processor, ISP, and combine those sensor chips to the deep learning capability with its GPU chip to identify the objects real time to enable self-driving vehicles. And this synergy between ARM and NVIDIA could potentially make them as a leader in self-driving car market. NVIDIA has also motivation and ambition towards the data center. So conventionally, Intel has been dominant player in data center with its heterogeneous computing enabled by its CPU, Xeon CPU, and Agilex FPGA. Now, NVIDIA is looking to change that or take some customers to adopt its own heterogeneous computing if it can combine the CPU design capability of ARM with its general purpose GPU to accelerate computing. Now, some people might have question over whether ARM really has that much of a chip design capability, because isn't it just giving the license for the chip design tool instead of actually designing the chips by itself? Actually, if we look at the business model of ARM, it's definitely getting the license fee by providing the design tools to semiconductor partners such as Qualcomm, Apple, Samsung, Huawei, MediaTek. And once those chips are actually being manufactured, they get small royalty fees per each chip manufactured. Now, it was true that ARM's business was mainly about licensing the chip design tools and partially designing the chips for the basic portions and let all their customers do their own customization to differentiate themselves. So Qualcomm, Samsung, Apple, Huawei, MediaTek definitely has their own chip customizing units. But it's also true that ARM has constantly developed its own capability to customize the chips. And these customers can actually pay extra price to outsource this customizing section to ARM because ARM's capability has grown that much recently. And again, this is why there's such a synergy to complement each other because ARM can provide world-class CPU to NVIDIA, and NVIDIA can provide world-class GPU to ARM, and this combination is, again, going to be beneficial for different applications that NVIDIA is looking for, such as auto industry, uh, artificial visions, as well as the data center. Now, even with this synergy, some people question whether, with ARM's customers, the chip designers, would they really approve such deal? And even if somehow the deal passes through, whether ARM's customer would still stay, or would they switch over to different platforms such as RISC-V? I mean, RISC-V is open source and free tool. Isn't that the thing these days? Well, the fact is that RISC-V has serious throwback compared to ARM architecture in that it doesn't have sufficient validation process in mind, meaning that while ARM invests a lot of money to make sure that its architecture has been tested thoroughly for reliable operation, RISC-V is open source platform, meaning that there's no single company or the group that is accountable or that has responsibility to make sure that operations are reliable. So such unreliability of operation is a pain point for customers that prevents them from switching from ARM architecture to RISC-V. So for this reason, customers might not switch from ARM architecture, but they might still prevent NVIDIA from buying the ARM business unit because it could simply form consortium instead to invest into ARM, basically owning the ARM collectively, such that no single company has dominant control over it. Now, there is a separate question of whether NVIDIA can pass through all the regulations and laws in different countries where ARM business resides. And there have been past cases where such deal has been blocked by each country's policies towards protecting its own business unit. And there has been the case where Broadcom purchase of Qualcomm has been blocked by United States, and also Qualcomm's purchase of NXP has been blocked by China. And there has been recently conflict in ARM's business unit in China, ARM China, where ARM tried to fire its subsidiary ARM China CEO Alan Wu for giving out the false information to its employees. He actually declared himself that he's not going to get fired, he's not going to resign, and make ARM China independent from ARM business. Now, it could be just a personal decision, but we need to think of this in the context that this is probably part of the China's effort to nurture its own semiconductor technology now that it's being decoupled from all the Western countries in terms of technology and economy. And this could be the reason why that it's trying to separate ARM China business unit from Western countries, UK, and also try to retain that technology within its country because it it's having a problem of getting access to Western technologies. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out to affect NVIDIA's deal over ARM business. So at this point, it has been a few weeks since there was news about NVIDIA's interest in ARM, and there is no clear conclusion yet. But going forward, there are several key questions we need to pay attention to is whether ARM's customers, its chip designers such as Qualcomm, Samsung, Huawei, would approve such deals, or would they form consortiums instead to buy ARM collectively? Or maybe Softbank might decide to IPO ARM business unit again to a stock market, such that ARM would remain as an independent company. Or even if these customers approve such deals, NVIDIA still needs to go through all the antitrust regulations in different countries, especially China. So let us wait for how this deal would go and turn out to be. And it's going to be interesting to follow up on this news. Thank you for watching video today, and hope we can catch up again for another different interesting tech news. Thank you.